Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. We are a full 1 minute past the hour, so we'll get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jennifer Kling. I am the VP of Marketing at SAP Litmus, and very excited to bring to you our webinar today. We have joining us two amazing guests. Richard Kerridge, who is with HPE, and he's been with HPE for about 26 years. Started right out of elementary school, and has been in the education space there for about 15 years, and before that was in IT. So he's leading the digital learning technology fight there, and then David Paring from Fosway Research, who is someone who I always enjoy listening to speak about learning and training, and always has great things to say. And I'm really looking forward to the two of you having such a great dialogue today. If we look at our agenda here, and it's a really loose agenda for everyone on the call today, we would love your active participation. So, Richard's going to talk a little bit about what's happening at HPE. You probably all already know who HPE is, but he's going to talk a little bit about what's happening there from a digital learning standpoint, what some of their best practices have been. And you might have heard that over the last year, there's been some unprecedented pandemic with this virus going around. So he's going to talk a little bit about what how that impact has hit HPE and how they reacted to that, and what changes they've made and what the results have been. But we would love to hear from you in the audience. So if you look on your control panel, there is a spot where you can ask questions. I will be keeping an eye on those questions, and I'll shout them out to David and Richard to answer throughout the discussion. So that's how we can get some audience participation going. So with that, I'll hand it over to David and Richard to get us started.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. And just to sort of give it, I think, because maybe people don't know who HPE are, Richard. So maybe just to kick us off, you can give us a little bit of background tell us about who HPE are, what you do, who you do it for, and just give that little bit of a flavour about what maybe learning looked like before the pandemic, because people get a sense of your journey then, because you've got some great things to tell, and I want to help people understand where you started from.
No problem. Yeah, let me just give you a few brief moments on that then. I mean, HPE stands for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and I think most people have heard of Hewlett Packard, even if you only used the laptops, PCs, printers, and stuff that you may have done in the past. So people will know that the HP goes back a very long way, and about 5 years ago, it split into different parts to allow the company to focus. And there were many parts. Actually, HPE's done two splits. It used to make everything from medical equipment to components to all kinds of stuff, and over the years it's split into different pieces. And in the last split, the enterprise part of the company, so what we mean by enterprise is today we describe ourselves as kind of an edge to cloud company. So what we mean is we make the networking appliances that allow you to connect, and the compute, storage, and other networking pieces that allow you to process a journey along the way. And we provide the services around that either on premises, or we do it in the cloud, or we do it as a hybrid. And that seems to be the big thing at the moment. So in my particular world, I work in the customer education services division there. And we've got the job of giving the customers the knowledge they need so that they can get the best out of the service and solutions that they get from us in terms of what they're trying to do, the outcomes they're trying to get from that, the services and hardware that we give them. So in education services, our job is really to deliver that customer training, make sure we get customer training delivered at the right place at the right time. So my specific role is in the learning and technology strategy and infrastructure piece within that division. So that's a little bit about HPE and kind of a drill down to where I am.
And in terms of learning and what learning looked like before the pandemic, could you explain a little bit about, so again, what did that feel like in terms of how did people work, how was it delivered, what did it really look like?
Sure. So we've trained people for quite some time. So before the pandemic, and we've been doing customer training now for, I want to say, at least 40 years, we've generally been mainly face-to-face. So for the vast majority of our stuff has really been instructor-led training. So we have had spots of remote, and I know we'll talk a lot more about the ILT and virtual instructor training as we go along. But broadly speaking, lots of face-to-face training, whether that's remote or in person, a mix of public and private events. It made up about 85 to 90% of our training delivery was instructor-led around the place. We teach on today we teach about 650 different courses through that mode, and we teach in lots and lots of different countries. So we'll take orders in from over 200 countries a year, and we'll teach in about 80 of them. And we teach in about 22 different languages. So it's a big global training business still. It's a small part of HPE, but as a training business itself, it's still quite large. In terms of the size of the business, though, it's quite manual. You ask about the kind of processes that we do around there. So we operate the same, the usual systems that you'd expect to find in there. We have some learning technology for delivering e-learning and digital learning, and we have virtual classrooms and those kind of things. But signing up, because people are buying training from us, there's no prescribed training. People don't have to take training from us. It's not a mandatory part of people's contracts or anything along those lines. Because of that, we generally have a fairly even flow of people coming into our business. There is some seasonality to our business, but generally it's fairly smooth, gentle rolling waves as we go through. So it means we've got quite a lot of manual processes, and that obviously was a little bit of a problem for us as we went into the pandemic, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a minute.
Yeah, sure. And in terms of that sort of what people's maybe beliefs were about what worked in customer training, and especially in that sort of technical field, what sort of, maybe I was going to say limiting beliefs, but maybe that's leading the witness too much. What sort of beliefs were almost pandemic before the pandemic?
Right. Yeah. So there were a lot of assumptions that have become kind of axiomatic. They'd been assumptions for so long that they're just kind of turned into facts, if you know what I mean. And we didn't challenge them anymore, or at least we perceive them to be. So if you we can shift. If you look into just the graph that we're showing here, if you look at that kind of what you're looking at, if you look at the global chart, the top left there, you can see what we were looking like. And I should explain to people that Q1, that's our first quarter. The beginning of that, so that's November to January of 2019 to 2020, right? So 2019 November to January 2020 in there, and you can see that that's what our business pretty much looked like globally, which is it's predominantly face-to-face. And if you look at the other charts as well, if you go into different parts of the world, you'll see even more so in EMEA, in our European, Middle East and Africa division. And that had been like that, and again in Asia as well, that had been like that for decades, literally tens of years, where we had seen, certain tropes pop up that hadn't been challenged in a long time. You can't do instructor-led training in all geographies. Some of these cultures will only accept face-to-face training, I mean actual face-to-face rather than just virtual instructor-led. And you can't get, digital transformations are very difficult, tends to be in English only. People don't want to learn that way. I guess as a summary, broadly speaking, we can say we discovered a few challenges to those assumptions as we went through the pandemic. It's amazing what you can do when you have to.
So what changed? So everybody knows that it's almost like a year ago, almost everywhere locked down, and I think
the graphs tell the picture, right? You can see in the business. If I can explain to people, the dark blue stuff is what we were doing with actual physical face-to-face. The green is instructor-led live training. So the two bars together represent it. You can see essentially, I'm sure everyone who's on the call can empathize with this as well, because I'm sure everyone went through this, right? We didn't go through this because we chose to. We had to shift everything over to remote delivery. So immediately we were in there. When the lockdowns and the travel was affected, we saw a sudden decline in the training, and two things really driving in these types of training. The two things driving that: one, the external environment, right? So we started to see lockdowns and travel bans come into places where it was not possible to do that. Our company in particular, HPE, like many other companies, I'm sure, decided to move quite early on it. So we were sent home straight away. We were out of our offices. We couldn't travel as a matter of company policy, and a lot of our customers couldn't do that either. So you either couldn't travel or you didn't want to travel. So that quite significantly disrupted our delivery operations. Even though we were doing quite a lot of virtual instructor-led training anyway, we had to make those shifts. And you can see in some of these other geographies, in North America, that wasn't so bad. We were cancelling quite a lot of private events and shifting them online. But in places like, if you look at places like EMEA, where they had to take their entire instructor-led business over the course of about 3 months and move it online. And in some cases, when the first lockdowns came in, when we were told to work from home as a company, I think we shifted about 600 events straight away online, like instantly over from face-to-face to virtual instructor-led training. And that was quite a significant shift. And I know we'll get on to talking about this, but there's some debate as to how much of this will roll back. I mean, you know, clearly we don't expect a transformation like this, although we think that this picture here represents probably a temporary extreme. It will have transformed the market permanently in ways that we probably don't fully understand yet.
And the thing is, I suppose, with the prospect of vaccinations and or in the UK, they're talking about opening things up sort of from April, May, June time, and we're already hearing people talking about almost maybe office life starting to reappear for September, and I think that's probably representative of other parts of the world as well. There's still a time to go before we get back to even people maybe being allowed to travel if they are as well. What passports do they need to have for their vaccinations to be able to turn up somewhere if they got to go on site? It's all these things haven't been sorted out. So I guess we've done some sort of surveys ourselves recently, and that story of everybody becoming a digital learning organization almost overnight is really common. Like we did a survey back in May, and 94% had said they changed their learning strategy. My assumption is that the other 6% had either already got a good digital learning strategy and didn't need to change, or actually there wasn't anybody to train because things had just locked down and moved on. So it was a massive switch shift. And then we saw 81% of stakeholders say that people say their stakeholders demanded more digital learning, and increases for 74% around the demand for digital learning from learners themselves, because there wasn't any other choices. So I think it's your journey to some extent is beautifully told in these charts, because it highlights that shift so magnificently, right? Going from 64% down to 8% in a matter of weeks on face-to-face training is remarkable. So how did you make that happen? Because this doesn't really just happen on its own, even though if you've been doing this a little bit in the past.
Yeah, I mean, there's two kind of key prongs to what we did here. The first thing, obviously, is the shift over to remote learning. One of the things we were able to do there, I mean, there's obviously an operational challenge, and then there's a delivery challenge there as well. So we were in a fortunate position where we were, say, in our North American, our Americas geography there at the bottom left, we had quite a lot of experienced instructors there who taught in virtual delivery and remote delivery way anyway. That market saw a transformation when there was another notable world event, you know, the 9/11 events there, the terrorist attacks in New York. They had a transformation effect on domestic travel in the United States, which caused a permanent transformation of the way we saw training delivery. People for a while there obviously couldn't travel and then didn't want to travel. So we built up a bit of experience there some time ago when we had that, and we were able to keep hold of that kind of experience. One of the biggest challenges we had in pushing delivery was when we saw people who were, you can kind of see it in the APJ slide there in Q2, there's not a huge shift, right? Because the country's not locking down, and also they're waiting for it to go away, right? They're thinking this is a temporary thing. You know, this will be done by March. This will be done by May. Let's just hang on. And a lot of our customers thought that as well. We'd bring them up and say, hey, how about coming on a virtual event? No, we'll wait. Thanks a lot. Okay. So some people waited, and then we got into a situation where we said, wow, okay, we really need to make this shift. We need to make this shift over here. beyond the immediate effect. You know, for the ones we couldn't run in the next 6 weeks, we shifted straight away. Then after that, we did see a dip in number of people coming through here. That's fair to say. If I was to lay over the number of people, we'd end up with like a bit of a dip. But in terms of the transformation that you were talking about there, in terms of what we did, we'll come back to that. But the instructors being able to cross-pollinate their skills is one of the key things we were able to do there. So getting an instructor in the US to maybe sit with an instructor in Japan or an instructor in Hong Kong and help them through, act as facilitators in those first ones. So a rapid transfer of knowledge to those places that had previously considered themselves untransformable. You know, through choice in their marketplace, totally legitimate, they decided that they were going to do only face-to-face business. When they're faced with a massive shift straight away, an immediate shift over, they find themselves lacking some of the knowledge. So when those untransformable markets are suddenly forced to either go out of business or do it this way, and then customers will come back saying, look, I thought I could wait. I've waited 3 months. I've got equipment in the loading dock and projects that are on hold. I'm working from home, but my business hasn't stopped. I need you to train my IT team. You've got to pick up the mantle, right? So some of that ability to transfer instructors over into that type of way of working, and some of the way in the operations teams, we're fortunate that we have some virtual operations teams as well, so some slightly centralized teams that serve. So we were operating an EMEA virtual team that was able to help our Asia Pacific colleagues by doing some of their operations. So they might not have known how to set up and run virtual events in Hong Kong, for example, or Singapore, and we'd do that for them from Amsterdam for them. So from over here.
And just in terms of that sort of upskilling of your teams in APAC who maybe weren't so familiar with virtual delivery, what were they learning from the guys in the US? Was it the technical things? Was it something about the style of delivery?
It's a little bit about, it's not so much the technical stuff, because the instructors are extremely qualified, and you know, one of the nice things that there's a this is part of the stuff for talking about later a little bit about how it's transformed some of the lessons, but there's a real plus and some minuses to being as focused on instructor training as you were. So much of that knowledge is in the instructor's head, and so much of the delivery of your business relies on the quality of your instructor staff. And we're very lucky that we've got our instructors are really highly regarded in the industry, and they get great customer satisfaction scores, but so much of that is down to them, you know, delivering it, right? So if I sat there and read from our storage manual, most people would be falling asleep within 5 minutes. So the instructors bring that to life, and their experience of having been field engineers or developers or hardware engineers, or even working in the research labs and then crossing over to teach, that fortunately was there. But in these kind of environments, I suppose we've all learned, I'm sure people on the call will empathize as well. You've probably used more virtual delivery and meeting formats like this than you've ever used before. Even if you work from home all the time, this is something that's new. So there are two real challenges for the instructors. One would be familiarity with the environment, right? With the teaching there. You are that disembodied element to this, being able to keep the energy and motivation up within the room, dealing with technical challenges, right? I mean, people don't typically have problems accessing a physical, you know, you get to the classroom, your flight's on time, you get out of the hotel and you manage to make it to the facility. Generally, it's pretty accessible. You can get in there, but and your audience has been pushed to where they're not used to working as well. So dealing with the kind of the tech challenges, you know, the upside down heads, the cat faces, you know,
Can you hear me? Conversation at the start of every webinar, every virtual meeting, it's camera on.
Exactly, and the instructor's got a role with that, which is, my hat's off to them in terms of how they roll with that. That's quite a different environment for them, right? Some of them are going back to teach from, you know, from studio apartments with young children and dogs and stuff, and they're teaching people who are in the same position, and they're and being able to roll with that and keeping that going through. I should have said most of our events are kind of 3 to 5 days in that length. It's quite a skill to do. So there's an element of teaching in there, and I'm sure we've all been in classes. I know I have with ours and with other companies, where you come across an instructor who just plays the virtual in classroom like a piano. They're experts at it. There's questions coming up. They're reading the chat. They're engaging people. They're very comfortable on camera, and that's not something that immediately transfers, I think.
Yeah. Amazing. So what do you think in terms of this sort of transition? What would you sort of summarize as almost that? What had the biggest impact, and what surprised you the most about this this particular transition?
So I think the biggest impact, and we've talked a lot about VILT at the moment. So the VILT was a huge thing for us, taking our face-to-face business in the VILT piece. But the little bit at the top of the chart in terms of had the biggest impact for us was really those little purple bits that you see at the top of the chart there, which represent our e-learning, both in the subscription form or kind of an a la carte course per course, course by course basis. And you can see that we saw some globally. It kind of remained kind of flat in there, but what's not shown in those numbers is one of the other ways we responded, and that really had the biggest impact there. I mean, one of the challenges we had, you mentioned earlier, was I talked about the manual challenge of our business. So one of the things that we decided to do after coping with our day-to-day business, there was also the extraordinary element of how do companies like ours respond to COVID. We're not. So you'll have seen a lot of things in the news about IT companies going and helping, fit networks into hospitals or build these temporary hospitals, and a lot of our colleagues were out doing that kind of stuff. So how does the education team help with that? So one of the things that the speed of this transformation helped with, and also raised one of the challenges is we're one of the easiest parts of the company to deliver things remotely. We can deliver electronically. It's just delivering at scale. So the company asked us, the big boss called up my boss and said, look, as part of the HPE response, we're doing a whole bunch of things, right? And one of the things we'd like to do, what could you do here? So he said, why don't we give away all of our digital learning? We started this digital transformation journey. We're trying to build it. It's embryonic. It's at the beginning of its life. And we're doing a few hundred here and a few hundred there. Why don't we give it away for 3 months to everyone who wants it in the world? No sign up for a free trial, credit card stuff. Just it's yours. Anyone can sign up for a month in a 90-day period. So that got a few of us panicking in my part of the
I'm
world.
Not surprised.
We're not used to that type of stuff. So we said, well, how many people do you mean? And he said, well, all of them, right? Whoever wants it. We said, 20,000, 200,000. Well, he says, we just don't know. Can you just put it out there and try? And I think that had one of the biggest impacts on us, because if and Jen, if you can show one of the other, just the next slide for me, I'll just show you through the kind of the impact we had beyond.
There's also a question already, people wanting to know what the results were of making that content available.
Right, so perfect segue into that. So we can talk a little bit. There's a couple of slides in here. If it comes up, if it's interesting, we can talk about how we did this. But if you look at the top left here, you see we basically, what we had to do, and I should tell the story a little bit about this as well. What we had to do was, before COVID, if you wanted to get access to this capability, you could. And we were running like 7-day free trials of this platform. And what would happen is that you would fill in an online form, and that would send an email to one of our lovely administrators, and someone like me or one of them would log in, pick up this email when we got in the morning, and we would add you to the system, and then we'd send you a little note saying, congratulations, please enjoy your trial. And that works if you're doing, a dozen.
A handful.
Right. And done in the individual countries, doing a handful each, and you can go around the countries and follow the sun and just process it. And that's our normal traffic. So of course, we hadn't deployed any big automation there. And we suddenly thought, if we're going to do a lot of learning through this, we're going to need to automate this thing. So we had to completely automate the sign-up process for this thing without any access to IT. And we had to do it within 7 days. And with only business analysts. And it's just, most training teams are small. Ours is no different. So our operations team is 5 people, including me, and 2 of us had the technical background had some process. We're systems analysts, so we've got we can design a process, but we wouldn't normally code. So using a whole bunch of low-code stuff that we had lying around the place, which people on the phone here on the call might have as well, we were able to put together that automated process. So we put it out there on day 1. To our own, we pushed it to the Salesforce and said, just share it with your friends, and just start.
Okay.
Just we'll test it. And we got 40 people in on the first day. Now, I should point out that on a normal day we would have 3.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Coming through there through this process on the 7th day.
Yeah.
So day 1 we did 40. We thought, phew, okay, we dodged a bullet there. That's not too bad. It's a 10x increase, but we're all good. Nothing's fallen over.
Yeah.
Day 2, a newsletter goes out announcing this. 1,200 people show up.
Okay, that's a bit of a shift.
We're processing, 1 a minute or whatever through the platform, and now we're in a position where if the automation falls over, we've got no way to manually recover, right? Because you're at a level of work with the people we have that we can't process these in email anymore. So we ran this for the full 90 days. Actually, it was 120 days by the time the last people grandfathered out, so they could sign up on day 90. They obviously had another 30 days to go. By the time we've done that, you can see from the numbers here, we ended up at process 20,000 people had signed up for the trial that we'd enabled through there. 8,000 companies, 167 countries. People started engaging with us from countries that we'd not worked with before. The people did engage quite well with the platform. We delivered just around about 150,000 courses were started or worked through. A lot of completions as well through there as well. So about 85% of that 20,000 learners engaged with one form of content that we had there in one form or another. So that's kind of the learner impact journey, if you like, on the right hand side. On the left hand side, on the operational side, the bit that saved our team, even if we could have added the labor, right, it would have taken us about 800 hours to process those learners, just the sign-ups. We sent 65,000 emails in the process of that. So you get an email when you join up. You get an email rejecting you if you've already had one. You get one on day 2 if you've not logged in to see if you're okay. And one at the end to say thank you very much for taking the time to try out the platform. So we're handling 3,000 duplicates through there, automating all these emails. And the other thing we were really expecting was, we were expecting lots of support calls, to be honest, but we only got 100 support tickets in the entire event, which I think is, I know, we are, so, and we used quite a simple process. I think, keep it simple has been around for a while, but it definitely came here. Part of the joy of this was, from an impact perspective, we didn't have, we're like most big companies. If you give us a long time, we'll come up with an incredibly complex and over-engineered solution. If you give us 7 days, it seems that actually we come up with something that's probably more usable because we haven't had time to overthink it and mess with it too much. So simple offering, simple sign up, and guess what? That seemed to be what people needed. And there's probably a lot of people are thinking, well, duh. But for us, that was quite an insight into what we saw in the way our learners wanted to do. And just a final comment on that: the 20,000 learners in those 90 days. That's the same number that we would normally process in about 10 months.
Wow.
So through our entire business, not just the learning bit. So the Ville thing was fun, but this I think was the biggest impact in learning for us. Yeah.
But so how did you stitch this together? Because it sounds like you've got to put some automation in, and I assume then they're flying through into the Litmus LMS, and you've got your content courses. Right. Could you talk us just through a little bit of that journey and what that felt like for them?
Kind of 2 challenges here, and Jen, if you can show the next slide for me, please. So this is kind of just a view of how we had to do it. And there's when we talk about this as a kind of a slide presentation, I use another slide here which just shows, I'm sure this is familiar to a lot of people. So if you want, in our world, this might resonate with others, you might be luckier than us, we're a very small part of a very large company. So when we want an IT project, we'll normally start now for talking about what we'd like them to consider next year. And there's a mountain of paperwork to fill in and cost benefit analysis stuff, and of course that's because IT are busy. They're a highly scarce, highly skilled resource, right? And we understand why that is. They are desperately trying to get all the requirements done for the business, but there's just too many of us throwing requirements over the wall. And as you might imagine, COVID didn't make that any easier. So if it was difficult to get hold of IT before, I mean, normally it's about a 3-month approval process. We had 7 days to do the whole thing. So this is the kind of the way we approached it here. We had a 2-day period where the boss was saying, we're going to launch this in a week's time, or in 9 days time.
Yeah.
You need to decide in 2 days whether you can do this or not. So come back and talk to me on Tuesday. Let me know if you're in or you're out. So we said, well, look, what have we got to lose? Let's do it. We haven't going to get any help from IT. So we had a look around for some serverless and cloud technologies, and we were talking before the call about how tech's kind of evolved for a while here. If you've been around long enough in IT, you'll know that low code, no code development, serverless stuff, that's been around in several other cycles before in several other forms. But this time, so a little bit cynical about whether that would work or not. But we thought, why don't we just take the tech we've got now? We happen to be Office 365, Microsoft 365 customers and Litmos customers, and within the tool set that we have, we've got things like Outlook, Exchange for email. We've got SharePoints. We've got access to Microsoft's Power Platform. So that's Power Automate for automating workflows, Power BI, and Teams, which and there are loads of other alternatives out there. There's AWS alternatives, Google Cloud Compute. Some people have got Salesforce, SAP. There's so many low-code platforms that you might not even know that you've got one. If you're using Google or Microsoft or any of these things, if you look, you've probably got this stuff sitting around the office now. So we'd been experimenting with this, and we thought, well, I wonder if we can scale this. So we wired up the process to do this. We thought let's keep the way we normally do it. Let's have people fill in the form and have it send us an email, but let's build a bot to read this email and then go work out whether it can give the person access and then do it and then manage the whole process from beginning to end. So we built that in 7 days, and it talks to, and this is where with Litmos was a fantastic partner here as well. So I should mention that not only did this stuff all stand up, Litmos just didn't blink at the number of people we were throwing at it, and we were able to load it in through the APIs into Litmos and get it done out there. And if Jen, if you can go to the next slide, it shows you kind of what we built.
I
7 days later.
There's a question asking about, if you used Litmos standalone for the automation, and so I think talking a little bit about what you built around that would be good.
Right, and there's a lot of talk in the industry, as I'm sure people have seen, around learning ecosystems, and I'll try not to geek out too much on my day job of the technology, but I'm a firm believer that your ed tech isn't just technology that's made for education. It's a combination of what you can reuse in your ecosystem, and we always thought that way anyway, but this pushed us out. So most of the technology here is not what you would call traditionally ed tech. Obviously, there's a big bit here in SAP Litmos sitting here as well, but you can kind of, if I walk you through the diagram, what you've got is a person that is going to a web form, and this could be anything, a form, in our case, it's like a Microsoft form, which we have internally. You could use any kind of web form. That sends an email over, which sits in a process mailbox. We have this check, set up, and automate routine in Power Automate. It's a bunch of drag and drop boxes. If you've helped your kids with Scratch or any of their kind of elementary school programming homework, this is genuinely no code. It's dragging boxes on the screen and connecting lines together. We unpack the email, break it up into bits, see who the person is, where they're from, with the form in there. We check in a little SharePoint list to see if that, which is the account tracker, to see if they've had a trial already. If they haven't had a trial, then we're very happy to let them in, and then we'll automatically use the APIs in Litmos to orchestrate their. We make a few calls to Litmos to create, to see if the user exists, create the user, add them into the team, give them access to the content, and then we go back to Exchange to say, send the user a message saying you're good to go. Please go here to log in. And then when the users then are coming in, it's not shown on here, but when the users are coming in to SAP Litmos, the usage data is being collected at the back end. And again, we're pulling that out via the standard reports in Litmos. So we didn't have a chance to do a big integration there. So we're literally just saying to Litmos, please every day just put a CSV file of all the usage in this place, email it to us. And then we've got a Power Automate routine that comes back, picks up that CSV, pops it into Power BI, which then ingests the data. And then we've got our teams looking at the dashboard, seeing all the sign-up stats. And that's how we track that information on the impact side. It all came from there. So
in 7 days.
And we did that well. I should be clear. We built it in 7 days, put it out there, put version 1 out there.
Yeah, sure.
And then over the next 7 days, we kind of stabilized it on the
true.
go. There wasn't too much to do, but you always find something, right? And it was just a matter of, and that was very new for us. We're quite risk averse because there's so few of us, right? When things go wrong, it can be bad. So that can make us a little bit afraid of taking risks. And you know, we would not have done it this quickly if we didn't have to. It made us feel quite uncomfortable. The fear of failure, the fear of being that exposed, and then having to say to the big boss, "Oh, sorry, it's all fallen over because we've made it out of matchwood and it doesn't really scale," and was quite worrying. But it's amazing what this stuff can do and what you can do without access to technical resources. If you've got some modern edtech technology and you've got some serverless or some low code stuff that's probably lying around the office waiting for you to use it.
And obviously a SAP Litmos solution that has the APIs that make it easy to join the process in as well.
I mean many we're fortunate that has a good API model in SAP Litmos, but by no means do you need to have the best in breed solution here to do this. Most of your modern LMSs these days will have at least the basic ability to look up a user, to create a user, to add users to various pieces of content, and to take them out of teams and bits of content. And that's all you really need to do here. There's not there genuinely isn't any programming at all. If you can write an Excel macro, it's not even a macro. If you can write an Excel formula in a cell in Excel, that's the level of skill that you would need to learn these technologies, which I imagine many education practitioners are like us in that they don't have their own IT teams. I mean, there are a few of them have them. I'm always jealous of colleagues in other companies who say, "Oh, I've got a couple of JavaScript developers in a closet somewhere who can whip this stuff up for me when I need it." But we're not in that crowd. We generally get told, "No, you're not in IT. You can't do IT." But it tends to leave a bit of a gap for process automation. So we knew how to do the education bit. We just needed to get people in through our manual processes. So this really helped.
Yeah, amazing. So in terms of like sort of what you've taken away from this journey as sort of top tips for succeeding with digital learning and lessons learned, what would you sort of highlight maybe from your perspective as being the key takeaways?
So I think so there's a few things here, you know, that under the category of I wish I'd known this.
Okay.
Before we had to go through it, which would have probably aided with some sleepless nights as we're putting some of this stuff together. But I think that, you know, resilience, some of the things that allowed us to move the VILT stuff as fast as we could are definitely some things in there that I think, you know, it's difficult to say there's a best practice playbook here because everyone's situation is going to be slightly different. But I think there are some things you can do to bring you out of here. So one of the things that we were very beneficial from, they were kind of was really our instructors' ability to move across and to have that capability. So what I mean by resilience is if, for example, you happen to have some instructors who teach more in virtual environments and more in digital environments who aren't exposed to that, exposing them to that as a regular part of your delivery mechanism anyway, because there are genuinely good scenarios in which these remote trainings work. This isn't just in case of COVID, you know, whatever the next one is, break glass and break this out. This isn't a plan B. This isn't a disaster recovery plan. These are genuine delivery modalities that you can be using. So use them. Don't silo them. Move your instructors across so they're as comfortable teaching in your digital classroom environment and as you can be. We were also there are kind of four key assets, if you like, that we had that enabled us to do this. First of all, we had a virtual classroom that we were familiar with. I'm sure most people have got some kind of teaching environment. A lot of people I know have had to learn on the fly to teach in Zoom, to teach in Teams and those kind of things. So being familiar with it and making sure instructors are ready to go there is a really good thing to have in your back pocket anyway. Having things like remote labs available to you is really good. Well, so one of the challenges that we had here was normally an instructor would have a bit of equipment with them in a classroom. If they're teaching somebody, you know, how to modify a storage array, we might have that in the room. And the instructor will say, "Look, everyone come to the front. I'll pull the back plane out of this and I'll show you how to do it." Right? There's a hands-on type of demo. So how do you do that kind of thing? Now, we're very lucky to do that with remote labs. So we've always been able to give students access to real equipment over the airwaves anyway. We've been doing that for years, but in this case, we also used some wearable technology here as well. So look for other things that you might be able to use. I mean, people think, people have asked us, as VR and education, and we've thought, well, that sounds cool, but we've never found an application for it. We actually used our augmented reality training technology that our support teams use. So our support teams were using these. Normally, when you get an installation at like a field hospital, right, we would send a person with the server and they'd install it for you. We're not allowed to do that anymore. So we send a server and a pair of glasses or a headset.
Really?
So we thought, and the person puts the headset on and then the installation engineer guides them through the setup. So we transferred that into our technical training world as well. So now our instructors are wearing these little headsets. They look quite funny in these wearable headsets, but they're able to just go hands-free and just with really high quality video, just stream what they're doing, really high quality audio off the headset. So bringing those kind of, look for areas, I suppose the tip there is look for areas where you can kind of transfer other technology that you wouldn't otherwise have considered in a way that's going to make that more immersive.
So you're really giving people that sort of true point of view, actually literally stood in the eyeballs of the trainer around how it's working. Because they stand in their shoes, but you're wearing the glasses, so you see exactly what they see.
Kind of be the instructor for that 5 minutes, a terrifying experience in some cases, depending on what they're doing. But I think you've talked about that as well, right? One of the challenges with remote learning is, I think I read a research article recently. They're talking about us all being away from our desks and other people for the year. That lack of human element in things. Anything that you can inject a little bit of interaction in, and some of the technologies out there, there's more than just webcams. I think, we'd kind of, wearable technology for training was the kind of thing we used to show at trade shows because it's cool. But it was lovely to see it being used in a really practical way here, that we could do that kind of thing. So some nice things around that. I think the other things I would say, maybe some standards and processes. It's always a boring topic to talk about, and I know we're talking about digital technology, but remember our businesses all run on the processes that we use, and you're only able to do the kind of automation that you see on the screen now if you're trying to automate one process that's used everywhere. If your processes, as I admit many of ours still are in some cases, there's still a French version and a Hong Kong version and a and a London version and whatever, right? There's lots of process fragmentation. So I think one of the things that we're doing as well, that we're doing on the back of this, is we're looking at these kind of things and thinking, wow, we built that in 7 days. I wonder what else we could build. And we're uncovering processes where we're thinking, let's see if we can standardize on some of that. So that's not particularly a learning or a technology tip, but I think if your processes are standard, you can do two things that we learned from here. One is you can respond with automation more quickly because you know that process, and it applies to more people. So when you automate it, more people get the benefit. The other thing I think you can do is, we talked about the ability for one of our operation centers to help, for instance, our European team and our American team were helping some of our teams in Asia Pacific. You can only do that if you're doing it the same way. So you can transfer and be a bit more resilient if they were able to do it for them, because that's the way we do VILT, a virtual instructor-led classroom scheduling. So I think looking at those kind of things can make you a bit less brittle. We got some of the benefits of those, but I'd be a little disingenuous to say it was all by design. There were some areas of this we got a little bit lucky. We're like, wow, I'm glad that process is the same. Otherwise, we just simply couldn't do this. But we're looking at that more and more now and saying, okay, when these kind of things pop up, and they don't have to be global, right? I mean, it's 10 years since Fukushima and those kind of things now, where we lost our whole Japan business for a month, and we had to do this there. But there's always some kind of incident going on somewhere with this. It doesn't have to be something quite as grandiose or terribly world impacting as we've seen here, for it to take it's a bit of a boring message. But looking at those resilience and standardization, I think will help.
No, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? I think that sense of automation and self-service, enabling people to self-enroll without human intervention, speeding up that process, is something that we probably should all aspire to try and do, regardless of whether it's internal or externally facing, right? You don't want to be a barrier to enabling people to get on. So thinking ahead in terms of the year to come, what does the future hold for digital learning at HPE, and are there things you're planning to adjust, new things you're going to try and do next?
I think yeah, there's a lot to do. I think one of the things that we that strikes me here that we've got to really dig into is there's a lot we've learned this last year that, you know, it's been a terrible year for everybody around the world, and some considerably more than others. And I think you've got to try and look for the silver linings in these things. And one thing I would say, a small silver lining here, is that we've learned stuff that we wouldn't have otherwise have learned. Right? We've got 20,000 learners coming to our digital learner platform that we didn't think would be there. We thought we might have a couple of hundred. So it's important that we're going to digest a lot of our learning. I think also back to that modality slide we were looking at the beginning, we want to kind of secure some of the footholds that we've got in some of those regions. We talked about kind of the assumptions that were challenged during this. We don't want those to roll back. So I think there are places where we've made real gains in terms of being richer in the way in which we can do learning. So we're not just a face-to-face instructor-led training company anymore, and there's been real benefits for that. Our customer feedback has been great. I should say that in these virtual events that we've shifted, the customer satisfaction has either stayed the same or gone up.
Wow.
So we think, well, why wouldn't we continue to make that available more widely? Why wouldn't we try and build on some of those things, really make sure we digest the learning and try and double down on some of the things that we've done there, make sure we don't slip back. I don't think anyone expects that Japan, for example, isn't going to go back to some form of face-to-face training, but does it need to go back to 99% face-to-face training or 100%? Maybe not. Maybe we can continue to have a foothold there for those customers in Japan who want to do that in those other ways. Maybe there's somewhere we can do that. So that's one thing I think. Beyond that, we're certainly going to want to look at these automation pieces. We've talked to that again as well. There's some things there where two bits coming out of that. I think there's a lot more process work that I think we can automate, not just to remove cost from the business, but frankly, these things deliver better customer experiences. It's so much better if you can sign up for something and a minute later, 2 minutes later, you're in, right? And that's just a better experience than waiting for me to wake up and come in and read my emails and send you a note. I mean, sometimes the personal touch is nice, right? But there are some things where it just makes sense to do this thing. So we've already taken this. So this technology you see on this kind of blueprint, this design pattern here, we've taken this and we've already done another 4 of these already. And we also thought, well, most of the moving parts in here are about taking people and setting them up. So if you now come in, customers who now come in and buy this service, we now use exactly the same technology to process all of our orders. So we let the big company order systems handle the order, but now we do all the entitlement through exactly the same workflow process that you see for the trial setup as well. So we'll be doing a lot more of that. I think two other areas that occur. I mean, we talked about expanding the human element. That's one of them. I think looking to see if, as we do more remote learning, we don't get more distant from our customers. One of the things we really benefit from is having the instructor in the room gives you 2 things. Whether it's a virtual room like this or a physical room, I think people like me in operations, we tend to think, oh, it's great that we don't see too many problems. Well, because a lot of those problems that a customer might have are dealt with right there by your skilled instructor. You know, she's in the room, she's teaching, she's solving problems right there in the classroom for the students, and you don't even ever see them because you've got this amazing interface between you and the learners that is the most sophisticated learning machine ever invented, the instructor, right? When we take them out of the loop and do the remote learning or the digital learning piece as well, we've got to find a way not to lose that. I think that's a case of making sure we can add our instructors in a little bit of a stronger way, but also we might need to, what we'd call in analytics, instrument the process a bit more. We might need to put more touch points into the process. So you can see in here, in this automation on the screen right now, there's no area in here where we're automatically asking you a survey. So it wouldn't hurt to check on the web form to put a little web intercept up to see, are you struggling with the form? Or a little AI chatbot that would come and say, are you struggling to find any content? The kind of thing that we take for granted that the instructors are doing in the classroom, that when we are operating like this, we just need to inject that human element in there. So I'd say those 2 are kind of those set are the big ones that we're really focused on for this year.
And one thing that interests me is just in terms of Do you see maybe an evolution around blended learning, maybe using more personalization, assessment? Is that something that sort of you're playing around with in terms of your future roadmap?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I mean, from so for blended learning, I mean, you don't hear the term used too much. I mean, it was a huge buzzword, wasn't it?
I can tell by the colour of your beard.
No, I love it, but it's happened though, hasn't it, David? I mean, we don't need to talk about it. I mean, we've just described blended learning, right? I mean, people are taking in these environments, they are genuinely taking some bits online, some bits with an instructor, some bits there's some bits self-study. Most of these courses now come with lab environments that stay with you for 30 to 90 days after the event, right? So you can go back in and say, you know what, I was a little bit sleepy on the second Tuesday, and I want to rerun the class. I want to at least practice the lab exercises. So you can go in and do those kind of things. I think from a personalization point of view, that's going to be big. You know, the blended learning of 2020, 2021 is the learning in the flow of work, that lovely catchphrase. I think to do that right, I know that tends to be more of an HR term, but it does apply to us as well. For us, that means embedding our training into our products and services more. And I think one of the big challenges we've got is around personalization. And one of the learnings we've had from here over the year is that to do decent personalization of learning, I need to know more about you than just about you as a learner, right? In fact, that information is useful, but it's probably not the most useful. So I love to know what course you took a minute ago, so I can recommend the next one in sequence. And that's cool, and we should do that. And I love to know that you're a database administrator, so I can tell you what other database administrators took. But if I've sold you if the company sold you a hybrid cloud backup solution, for example, I would love to make recommendations to you based on whether you're using that or not, how often you're using it, how long it takes you to actually make a backup data set in that platform. Do your backups fail more than our users regularly do? And that kind of preemptive stuff. So part of our challenge in the customer world, I think, in terms of learning in the flow of work, isn't so much as exciting as it is looking at the kind of the platforms that are enabling us to put things in the flow of work. It's about taking the data that's occurring in the flow of work and then using that to personalize the training so that we're almost preemptively saying to our customer, hey, we think that this training will really help you, right? You seem to be struggling to onboard onto this other platform, and that's the tech is available for us to do that now in a way that it really hasn't been before. And I think that's going to yield some nice insights. I think it's going to. Now we're just starting on that journey, but that's where our head's at in terms of going along that.
But that sounds really transformational because you're starting to dig deep into the business data, into the utilization data, into the adoption and maybe the pain points to some extent, because you're starting to get the trigger points of what tickets were raised, what's not being used within the platform, which then drive real personalization, which is a lot about actually, how can I make your life easier as database administrator? How can I make you more successful based on what's really happening in your business? And I think, I think that's such a wonderful thing, because I think we see so little of people trying to get to the business data to help inform real learning decisions. It seems to be, like you were saying, sort of quite surface of, oh, what role have you done? What course have you taken? Which is scratching the surface.
It's useful, but if I think, especially if it's in the same company, as you say, the business data, generally businesses tend to put their arms around data and not share it a lot with their other divisions. It's my customer, not the support division's customer or the servers division's customer. But we're opening up that data now and starting to look at it and start to see if we know you. If we knew what we knew and we were able to do that, then I know it's not a new concept of putting learning into customer success, but really talking about it and doing about it are two different things, and we're finding some of the challenges there. But some of these things have always been possible, like education as a customer success player has been around for a long time. But being able to do that with the technology in a more automated way, so not having to wait for a customer success advisor to detect, have a conversation with a customer, and then offer them some free training as a salve for something that they were disappointed with 3 months ago. Being able to detect that on the fly by getting that telemetry of data, taking the learning analytics that you've got. I mean, there's a lot of talk about analytics around learning, but for me, trying to convince our colleagues in the other part of the business that the learning data set combined with their data set is something so powerful. Is for me the next boundary that we've got to try and tackle.
And it sounds like you've almost got some of the components that you could actually do follow-ups around the training. Say, you had this training a while ago, give us your sense of how well that's translating into what's happening in your business and how you're using our new bits of software. So almost like sort of do that 180 or self-assessment. So I guess you can start to short circuit some of those conversations as well, which is amazing.
Exactly, and in the same way that we're doing that today with some of our other subscriptions, you're right. We can take that forward in a much more deeper way in the future.
Sorry, Jen, I didn't mean to cut across you.
That's okay. There's one really good question that I'm hoping you can answer in like 60 seconds or less. Start to wrap it up. But so the question is how you're addressing people with learning disabilities or other disabilities that might be struggling with this virtual process.
It's a great question, and the answer is probably not as well as we should be and as well as we could be on there. I think that you raised some. We do tend to build our e-learning to comply with things like American Disabilities Act and Section 508 compliance and those kind of things to make sure. That's for a long time been embedded in instructional design, but this shift that we've seen with the pandemic has probably pushed us into some areas where those things don't exist as well as they should. So we're probably not doing as good a job there as an industry as we probably could do. And I think in some of our virtual classroom technology, David, I don't know, you might have a finger on the research in terms of what's happening there better than I do.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's something that is not as mature as it should be, but I think there's ways of compensating through more human-centered activities to make sure that people aren't left out. I think we don't always have to create a mirror of, oh, this also works. I think what we have to do is almost reach out and make sure we provide maybe an even more attentive service to those people who struggle to go through some of the things that we'd offer almost for the mass. And that's and I think that what we're able to do by scaling up some of the solutions is actually focus more of our attention to provide more support to those people who need it. So I think we can think maybe creatively about how we create a better relationship for those people who struggle to get into some of the services that we might want to offer.
Great. So just see if there's any other questions. I think we've captured most of them, and we're almost at the top of the hour.
Time flies.
Amazing. Where did the time go?
I don't know, but it was a fantastic discussion, and I know I enjoyed listening, and I think our audience enjoyed as well. For anyone who, I know there have been a couple of questions asking, but yes, the recording will be made available after. So if you wanted to hear something again or missed something or want to share with a colleague, everyone who is in attendance and registered today will get a recording of that as well. And if there are any other follow-up questions, Richard, we may reach out to you and let you know.
Happy to address those if I can, absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing.
All right. Well, with that, we will conclude today's webinar, and I thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Richard and David, so much for your time and the great dialogue.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Richard. Amazing sharing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.